Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do a kind of end of the day close about the stock market. So what happened today in the stock market? Let's dig into these charts and find out. Something kind of interesting that we saw happen. The market sold off pretty aggressively into the close. Started really in the last hour and sold off pretty aggressively. So what does that mean? What's the difference maybe between selling off or breaking out on a Friday versus a Tuesday? Well, typically Friday, institutions are not taking major positions on a Friday in the last hour, but they do take major positions on a Tuesday in the last hour. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's kind of the difference. The last hour can be meaningful. It's just not typically meaningful on a Friday, although sometimes it can be depending on if there's a news event. But for the most part, you look for the moves that take place during the week when the institutions are moving money around. All right, so that's what happened today. As I zoom into the triple Qs, let's see what's going on. All right, this is interesting to me. See this bearish engulfing candle from the other day? That's the one I said in the video. I said, look, we have a bearish engulfing and we have confirmation right here that a sell signal is in place. Now, what they did yesterday was they gapped up and made everything really seem very strong and bullish. And even today, we were just grinding higher basically all day, except there was no volume. Up until the last hour, this was going to be an extremely low volume day. So to me, that seemed pretty suspicious. And what they did is they ran up and filled the gap on triple Qs. Here's the gap fill right here, sitting at 229.50. And that gap comes all the way back from when we first started to break down back in February. And they ran up and filled the gap and then failed and closed back below this resistance of 227.50. So 227.50 is the high or the top end of this breakdown candle, this bearish engulfing and an outside day candle. And this was the candle that told me that, okay, there's something going on here and it's interesting. But then they gap it up and run it all the way to the gap intraday and try to trick everybody basically. And that was a pretty good trick, I would say, because we got the daily close back below resistance. So take it for what it is, but ultimately this 227.50 is holding as resistance. And the intraday stuff is just there meant to trick you, basically get you to stop out, run stops, fake you out. So we'll see if this continues to hold as resistance or if this wants to have a sell-off tomorrow. We don't know, but it is interesting to see the price action holding on the daily chart, holding this area. So that's two actual, you can see. And the day before they ran up two and tried to fill the gap, didn't quite get there, and then came back and closed right at resistance. And then today they ran up, filled the gap, came back and closed below resistance, down a little bit. So that's holding right there. So keep that in mind. Resistance is resistance until it's broken officially. And on a daily chart, this is not broken. So that was a pretty bearish close. When you look at the hourly, you can see we pretty much closed, Qs closed down near, well, Qs closed, pretty much at the low of the day for today. And so we'll see if there's further follow through. Let's look at the futures. See the futures, they did the same thing. They closed below this resistance right here, fell right down. So that sets the futures up in a bearish posture for overnight trading. Whether that has some follow through, we'll see. But that does seem like it might have some sell off and maybe gap down tomorrow. Again, we'll have to watch and wait and see. Look at the S&P 500. Same thing right here. Here's your resistance, 294.90. Popped it over the last 2 days. Bearish close, wiped out those last 2 days and entered this gap on the SPY. So here's this gap right here. And then here's a gap fill. So that might be the destination in the short term. Run down and fill this gap. And then we maybe continue the more volatility chop session that we've been in for the last whatever. But that's kind of a short term stuff. So maybe we even open down at this gap. That's possible. XLV, we're going to do a quick run through because I did a video earlier today, but see this price action opened higher, looked like a breakout, sold off instantly, came down, ran up and did a back test of resistance, 101, about 101.10, and then continued to sell off. So that's bearish price action right there. That tells me we're going south, at least down to support again. We're going to break out of this range at some point in time. It could have broken out to the upside several times. Here's 1, 2, and 3 have failed each time. So we'll see. Maybe it wants to break out to the downside. XLF, just in general, bearish. All right, Walmart. And I want to end it. I'm going to end it pretty much on Walmart. This is what. And actually, before Walmart, let's look at TVIX. So I took a position on TVIX. We were grinding along support. I pointed that out in my earlier video. So I buy things at support. I sell things at resistance. I'm very methodical when it comes to that, and I wait for the charts to prove me that I'm wrong. And they do sometimes, but oftentimes they try to trick you and make you think you're wrong, and then ultimately they prove you that you're right. Kind of like when you have intraday breakouts and intraday breakdowns, but then they recover. So again, here is where I started to buy it, and sure enough, we had a nice move in TVIX at the end of the day. That thing's up 14-15% from that area. So that trade is working out nicely. What I did is I sold half my position at the close, and I'll carry half into tomorrow. This market is really choppy. It's gappy. I don't want to give up a nice 14-15% trade. I don't want to just give that up because I'm greedy. So I'll take half of it, and I will take half of it and see if we get a big move tomorrow, and I'll ride those shares higher if that's what the market wants to do. All right, now back to Walmart. This is how I want to end the video. Look at this price action. If I go to the daily chart, that is a bearish engulfing candle right there, and that is an outside day. So we traded, we opened higher from the previous day and closed lower from the previous day. We closed right on support. Here's support right here at 124.74. So maybe we bounce or maybe we don't. But the thing is that this candle is a reversal candle. This is a bearish candle. And now what we look for is confirmation. If we get confirmation, that would be further selling tomorrow. And the bigger the red candle, the better, basically. So if we get a nice big sell-off tomorrow, then that sets this up for a bearish move. It's been pretty choppy. It's moved up, we've gone down, we've moved back up. But as soon as we got back up here today on earnings, they slammed it down and sold it. So what I want to kind of point out is if Walmart is selling off because their earnings, the outlook, maybe the earnings report was the high, maybe people thought, okay, this is the high watermark, let's sell this thing, and if traders and investors think Walmart is at a high watermark, what's that say about consumer spending? That's what I want to point out. Walmart being a major retailer in the country, and they have a relatively good online presence. What does that say about consumer spending, and what does that say about earnings coming up in the future? So this is something to watch for a little bit. Walmart's a little bit of a bellwether. It can tell us, whether there's going to be, a recovery or not. And the reality is that my whole trading premise is technically based, but at the same time, but the fundamentals behind what we've got going on in this rally is the pandemic is really the needle that pricked this bull market. And it doesn't really matter if we're coming back to business and restarting. What matters is the fact that we needed so much fiscal stimulus just to get through a couple months of a shutdown. And that just shows the state of the U.S. consumer. That shows the state of businesses. And it shows the fact that, to me, it seems like the business cycle has ended and we're now going into a deflationary period. So that we'll have yet to see if that plays out. But ultimately, central banks can't stop a deflation from happening. It will happen at some point in time. They can delay it, but they can't stop it. So the business cycle is the business cycle. So we'll have to continue to watch that. So yeah, that's how I really want you guys to just look at this Walmart. Big bearish engulfing, outside day. That is a reversal candle. Now you look for confirmation. So we have the setup. You look for the trigger basically. And you could short this if you haven't already on a breakdown of this support level of 124.50 basically. Look for the hourly close. You don't want to, you could jump the gun and short it if you can get it right at a breakdown as it starts to break down, but I would get out if it can recover that, and it might chop around a little bit before it actually breaks down. So a lot of the time they'll make it look like it breaks down, they'll chop you to death before you actually get the move, and that can you can take on a lot of losses when you're trying to trade in that intraday chop. So you have to be careful there. But if we get an hourly close that's bearish and a negative sell-off day, then that confirms that this was a reversal candle. This is continued bearish action, which should set the momentum bearish and set us up for a fall all the way down to the bottom of the wedge, which is, you can see there's my wedge, and that sets us up for a drop all the way down to about, depending on when we get there, let's just call it 110 to 108 or so. And that would be a drop from where we're at of roughly 12.5%. So that's a trade idea. We have the setup. We're just looking for the trigger. And that looks pretty bearish close to me so far. So, all right, guys, I'll get the video out. Just wanted to give everyone an update on how we closed. We did close bearish. That was a pretty negative close. Does not mean that it will continue tomorrow. Just means that we had that, we did have the market closing back below resistance. Resistance is holding. So I don't think they're going to make it that easy for the bulls and just continue to run this thing higher and higher. I think there is going to be some sort of a pullback and possibly a lot more. So thanks, guys. Give me a thumbs up. Appreciate it. Leave a comment if you have thoughts or feelings about what I just said about the markets and about some of these stocks, some of the charts, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow.